Ruby Johnson stood outside the biggest, fanciest building she had ever seen. The National Talent Academy looked like a palace made of glass and gold. Giant marble columns reached up to the sky like the fingers of giants. Inside, chandeliers sparkled like 1,000,000 captured stars. She was only 13 years old, and her hands were shaking. "You can do this, baby girl," Ruby whispered to herself, repeating the words her Grandma Dorothy always said. "Your voice is your power. Nobody can take that away." Ruby clutched her old brown backpack, the one with a torn strap that Mama had tried to fix with duct tape. Inside was her water bottle, her sheet music, and something else, something secret, something that might change everything. She pushed through the heavy golden doors. Inside, the lobby was filled with other kids waiting to audition. But Ruby noticed something right away. Almost everyone looked the same. Pale skin, expensive clothes, fancy hair styled perfectly. Parents wearing suits and diamond earrings, talking on shiny phones. Ruby looked down at her own dress, the nicest one she owned. Mama had bought it at the thrift store and stayed up late, sewing the hem. It was clean and pressed, but it was simple, plain blue cotton. A few kids stared at her. Some whispered to each other. Ruby lifted her chin high, just like Grandma Dorothy taught her. Number 47, Ruby Johnson. Ruby's heart hammered in her chest like a drum. She walked down a long hallway covered in paintings of old white men in fancy frames. Their painted eyes seemed to follow her, judging her with every step. The audition room was enormous. 3 judges sat behind a long wooden table on a stage. Red velvet curtains hung on the walls. Rows of empty seats stretched back into shadows. The middle judge, a woman with silver hair pulled tight in a bun, looked up. Her name tag said Judge Campbell. Her lips pressed together in a thin line when she saw Ruby. "Name!" Judge Campbell's voice was cold as ice. "Ruby Johnson, ma'am." "Age?" "13, ma'am." "And who paid your entry fee?" asked the judge on the left, a man with a gray beard named Judge Harrison. He said it like he was asking, "How did you afford to be here?" Ruby felt heat rise to her cheeks. "My mama, sir, she works 2 jobs. She cleaned offices at night for 6 months to save the money." Judge Harrison raised one eyebrow. Judge Montgomery, on the right, a thin man with glasses, wrote something in his notebook. Ruby couldn't see what it said, but she saw him smirk. "And where did you train?" Judge Campbell asked, looking bored. "At Mount Si Baptist Church, ma'am. My Grandma Dorothy is the choir director there. She's been teaching me since I was 4 years old." "A church choir," Judge Montgomery said slowly, like the words tasted bad. "How quaint." The 3 judges looked at each other. Ruby saw something pass between them. A look, a secret conversation without words. Judge Campbell sighed. "Well, what will you be singing for us today?" Ruby's throat felt tight. She had practiced her answer 100 times, but now the words stuck like peanut butter. I'd like to sing Amazing Grace, ma'am." All 3 judges burst out laughing. Ruby's face burned with shame, but she stood very still. "Of course you are," Judge Harrison said, wiping his eyes. "How predictable. Do you people ever sing anything else?" "You people." Those 2 words hit Ruby like a slap. Judge Montgomery leaned forward. "Don't you have something more appropriate? Perhaps something that shows actual technical skill? This is the National Talent Academy, not a Sunday service." Ruby felt tears trying to push their way out, but she blinked them back hard. She remembered sitting in Grandma Dorothy's tiny kitchen last week, eating cornbread and talking about this exact moment. "Baby girl," Grandma had said, her old hands holding Ruby's young ones. "They're going to try to make you small. They're going to try to make you doubt your own gift. But you remember this. Our people have been singing Amazing Grace for hundreds of years. We sang it in chains. We sang it in freedom marches. We sang it when they told us we couldn't vote, couldn't eat at their counters, couldn't drink from their fountains. That song has more power than they'll ever understand." Ruby lifted her head and looked Judge Campbell straight in the eyes. "Im singing Amazing Grace nam. That's my choice." Something flickered across Judge Campbell's face. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "Fine," she said sharply, "but make it quick. We have real talent to see today." Real talent. The words echoed in Ruby's head. Ruby walked to the center of the room. The piano player, a kind-looking older man, gave her an encouraging nod. She nodded back. This was it. Everything Mama had worked for. Everything Grandma had taught her. Everything she had discovered in her weeks of secret investigation. Ruby reached into her pocket and felt a small recording device. She pressed a button. It was recording now. Everything. Every word the judges said. Every look. Every bit of proof. Because Ruby Johnson hadn't just come here to sing. She had come here to expose the truth. The piano began to play. Ruby took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air and courage and the prayers of all the people who came before her. And then Ruby Johnson began to sing. But before we hear Ruby's voice fill that room, we need to go back 3 weeks, to where this plan really began. Ruby had been sitting in the public library after school, researching the National Talent Academy on the old computer. She was supposed to be looking up tips for her audition. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold. She clicked through the Academy's website, looking at photos of past winners. Year after year after year of smiling faces. And almost every single face was white. 20 years of competitions. 20 years of the best talent in the nation. Out of 200 winners, only 3 had been black. Only 5 had been any kind of brown at all. Ruby's fingers flew across the keyboard. She dug deeper. She found old newspaper articles. She found complaint letters that had been ignored. She found a pattern. Then she found something else. Hidden in an old forum post from 10 years ago, someone had written, "Judge Campbell stole my composition and published it under her own name. I have proof, but no one will listen to a black student's word against hers." The post had been deleted, but Ruby had learned how to find deleted things. Grandma Dorothy always said Ruby was smart as a whip and twice as quick. Ruby printed everything. She filled a whole folder with evidence. That's when she met Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams was 72 years old, with kind eyes and hair like white cotton. She had been a lawyer during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Now she volunteered at the community center, helping people who couldn't afford lawyers. Ruby had brought her folder to Dr. Williams's tiny office, hands trembling. "Ma'am, I think something wrong is happening. I think it's been happening for a long time." Dr. Williams had put on her reading glasses and studied every page. Her face grew more serious with each one. "Child," she finally said, "this isn't just wrong. This is a systematic discrimination. This is illegal. But how do we prove it?" Ruby asked. "They'll just say it's coincidence. They'll say the white kids were just better." Dr. Williams smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Baby girl, I've been fighting these battles for 50 years. They always say that. The question is, how brave are you?" "Very brave," Ruby said, lifting her chin. "Good, because we're going to need proof they can't deny. We're going to need them to show the world exactly who they are." That's when they made the plan. Dr. Williams knew people. Lots of people. People who had been hurt by the Academy before. People who had stayed silent because they were scared or ashamed or didn't think anyone would believe them. One of those people was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was 45 now, but when she was 17, she had auditioned at the National Talent Academy. She had been brilliant, a piano prodigy who could play Beethoven from memory. But Judge Campbell had failed her, saying her interpretation lacked sophistication. 2 weeks later, Judge Campbell had published a piano arrangement that sounded exactly like Sarah's. Note for note, phrase for phrase. Sarah had written a letter, a detailed letter explaining what happened, with musical proof. She had sent it to the Academy's board of directors. They never responded. Sarah had kept that letter for 28 years, hoping that someday someone would care. "I was just a girl," Sarah told Ruby, tears in her eyes. A black girl with a big dream. They crushed that dream like it was nothing. Ruby held Sarah's wrinkled letter in her hands. "They won't crush mine, and we're going to make sure they never crush anyone else's again." Dr. Williams made phone calls. She contacted a journalist named Marcus Reed, who worked for the National News Network. She contacted a civil rights organization. She contacted a lawyer who specialized in discrimination cases. Everyone wanted to help, but they all needed the same thing: undeniable proof. That's when Ruby came up with a recording idea. What if we record everything? Ruby asked, what if we record them being exactly who they are? What if we catch them saying the things they really think? Dr. Williams's eyes lit up. Smart girl, but it has to be legal. In this state, you can record conversations you're part of. That means during your audition, anything they say to you can be recorded. And what if other people are watching? Ruby asked, what if we live stream it? Marcus Reed, the journalist, nearly jumped out his chair. That's brilliant. We can set up a private live stream. Just a select group of witnesses, civil rights leaders, lawyers, education officials. They can watch it happen in real time. That way, if something goes wrong, we have witnesses, important witnesses. For 3 weeks, they planned. Ruby practiced her song until her voice was strong as steel and soft as silk. Dr. Williams gathered 14 other victims of the Academy's bias. People who had been rejected unfairly. People who had been stolen from. People who had stayed silent for years. Sarah Jenkins wrote out her testimony and had it notarized, legally certified as true. Marcus Reed set up the technology. A tiny camera hidden in Ruby's backpack. A microphone no bigger than a button. A live stream that would go to 50 of the most powerful people in education and civil rights. Ruby's mama didn't know about any of this. Ruby felt bad keeping secrets, but Dr. Williams had explained. Sometimes, baby, we protect the people we love by carrying the heavy weight ourselves until we're strong enough to share it. The night before the audition, Grandma Dorothy had sat with Ruby on the porch. You seem different, child, Grandma said. You seem older. Ruby leaned against her grandmother's shoulder. Grandma, what if singing isn't enough? What if I have to do more? Grandma Dorothy was quiet for a long time. Then she said, our ancestors didn't just sing songs, baby. They sang songs that carried messages. Songs that planned escapes. Songs that kept hope alive when hope seemed dead. Music has always been more than music for our people. It's been survival. It's been resistance. It's been revolution. So if I sing for more than just me, if I sing for everyone they hurt, is that okay? Grandma Dorothy kissed Ruby's forehead. That's not just okay, baby girl. That's sacred. Now, standing in that audition room with the judges staring at her like she didn't belong, Ruby felt the weight of everything. The recording device in her pocket was running. 50 people were watching through the hidden camera. Dr. Williams was in a car outside with 3 lawyers and a civil rights activist. Sarah Jenkins was watching from her home, hands clasped in prayer. The evidence was ready. The plan was set. All Ruby had to do now was sing, and trust that the truth, when it finally came out, would be louder than any lie. The piano finished its introduction. Ruby opened her mouth, and the sound that came out was like nothing the judges expected. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Ruby's voice floated through the audition room, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. It wasn't just singing. It was something else. Something bigger. Judge Campbell's pen stopped moving. Judge Harrison's smirk disappeared. Judge Montgomery looked up from his notebook, his mouth slightly open. Ruby sang like Grandma Dorothy taught her, from the soul, not just the throat. She sang with the power of every Sunday morning at Mount Si Baptist Church. She sang with the strength of her mama working 2 jobs. She sang with the pain of every person who had been told they weren't good enough because of the color of their skin. That saved a wretch like me. The piano player had tears running down his cheeks. He had worked at the Academy for 15 years. He had seen this happen before. Talented kids dismissed, dreams crushed, all because of something as stupid as skin color. Ruby's voice grew stronger. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Judge Campbell shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Something about this performance was making her nervous. The girl wasn't just singing. She was testifying. She was accusing. She was demanding to be heard. Was blind, but now I see. As Ruby held that final note, Letting it ring through the room like a bell, something happened. The auditorium doors burst open. Dr. Williams walked in, followed by 3 lawyers in suits. Behind them came Marcus Reed, with a camera crew. Behind them came Sarah Jenkins and 13 other people, all former students who had been wronged by this academy. Judge Campbell stood up so fast her chair fell backward. What is the meaning of this? This is a closed audition. Not anymore, Dr. Williams said calmly. She held up a tablet. For the past 15 minutes, 50 witnesses have been watching a live stream of this audition, including the State Education Commissioner, the head of the National Arts Foundation, and the director of the Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund. Judge Harrison's face turned white as paper. You recorded us? Judge Montgomery whispered. That's illegal. Actually, one of the lawyers said, stepping forward, in this state, any party to a conversation can record it. Ruby was part of this conversation. She had every legal right. Marcus Reed's camera was now broadcasting live on the National News Network. Thousands of people were watching. Dr. Williams pulled out a thick folder. We have 20 years of evidence showing racial discrimination in your selection process. We have testimony from 14 victims. We have financial records showing that scholarship money meant for diverse students was redirected. And we have this. She held up Sarah Jenkins's letter from 28 years ago. Judge Campbell, do you remember Sarah Jenkins? The 17-year-old piano prodigy whose arrangement you stole and published under your own name. Judge Campbell's face went from white to red. That's not you can't prove. Yes, we can, Sarah Jenkins said, stepping forward. Her voice shook but stayed strong. I have the original sheet music with my handwriting. I have dated notebooks. I have testimony from my piano teacher. And I have the letter I sent to the Academy's board. The letter they ignored because they didn't want to believe a black girl over a white judge. The room erupted. People started talking all at once. More reporters rushed in. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. Ruby stood in the center of it all, still holding her microphone, watching justice unfold. Judge Harrison tried to leave, but 2 lawyers blocked the door. We have questions about the financial irregularities, one said. Specifically, the scholarship fund that disappeared. Judge Montgomery sat down hard, his head in his hands. I just went along with it. I didn't realize. You didn't realize? Shouted a woman from the group of former students. You didn't realize you were destroying lives? You didn't realize you were stealing our futures. Ruby walked over to Judge Campbell, who was now sitting at the table, her face in her hands. Judge Campbell, Ruby said softly. The judge looked up with red. What eyes? I didn't come here just to sing, Ruby said. I came here to make sure nobody else gets hurt the way you hurt all these people. I came here to change things. You're just a child, Judge Campbell whispered. You don't understand how the world works. Maybe I'm just a child, Ruby said, but I understand that wrong is wrong. And I understand that staying quiet makes me part of the problem. My grandma Dorothy says, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering so that others never go through the same thing. The State Education Commissioner, who had been watching the live stream, arrived in person within the hour. By evening, all 3 judges had been suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, Judge Campbell had resigned. Evidence of the plagiarism was undeniable. Judge Harrison was under criminal investigation for embezzlement. Judge Montgomery agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a lighter punishment. But more importantly, things changed. The National Talent Academy was put under new leadership. A committee was formed, including Dr. Williams, Sarah Jenkins, and 5 other civil rights advocates. New rules were created. All auditions would now be recorded. All judges would receive mandatory anti-discrimination training. A scholarship fund would be established specifically for students from underrepresented communities. An independent board would review all decisions to ensure fairness. The story went viral. Ruby's performance of Amazing Grace was watched by millions of people around the world. News shows called her brave. Celebrities shared her story. But Ruby stayed humble. I just did what was right. she told Marcus Reed during an interview. What anybody should do when they see injustice. 6 months later, Ruby stood on a different stage. This one was at Lincoln Center in New York City, one of the most famous performance halls in the world. She had won a full scholarship to the Juilliard Conservatory, one of the best music schools on earth. But she hadn't won it from the National Talent Academy. She had won it because a Juilliard professor had seen the viral video and said, "That girl has something special. Real talent can't be hidden." Ruby wore a new dress. Not from a thrift store this time, but still simple and elegant. Grandma Dorothy sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Mama sat next to her, holding her hand, crying happy tears. Dr. Williams was there. Sarah Jenkins was there. All 14 of the people who had helped expose the truth were there. Before Ruby sang, she spoke to the audience. "A wise woman once told me that our voices are our power," Ruby said. "But I learned that our voices are even more powerful when we use them to speak up for people who can't speak for themselves, when we use them to shine light in dark places, when we use them to demand that the world be better than it is." The audience applauded. "True talent," Ruby continued, "isn't about being perfect. It's about being true. True to yourself. True to your people. True to what's right. And when institutions try to dim your light, because they're scared of your shine, you don't get dimmer. You shine brighter." The applause grew louder. Ruby smiled. "This song is for everyone who was told they weren't good enough. For everyone who was pushed down but got back up. For everyone who knows that justice is worth fighting for." And then Ruby Johnson, 13 years old, scholarship student, revolutionary, sang Amazing Grace one more time. But this time, she wasn't singing in a room full of people who wanted to silence her. She was singing in a room full of people who wanted to hear her voice ring out loud and clear and unstoppable. When she finished, the entire audience stood up. They clapped until their hands hurt. They cheered until their voices were hoarse. They witnessed something special, not just a talented girl singing, but a movement being born. Because Ruby hadn't just changed one academy. She had started a conversation across the whole country about fairness, about giving everyone a real chance, about judging people by their talent and character instead of their skin color. And that conversation was changing everything. Later that night, Ruby video called Grandma Dorothy from her hotel room. "You did it, baby girl," Grandma said, her face glowing on the screen. "You didn't just open a door for yourself. You opened it for thousands of kids who will come after you." "I was so scared, Grandma," Ruby admitted. "What if it hadn't worked? What if nobody believed us?" "But they did believe," Grandma said. "You know why? Because the truth is always louder than lies. Eventually. It just needs brave people to speak it out loud." Ruby smiled. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby. Now get some rest. You got a world to change, and you'll need your energy." As Ruby went to sleep that night, she thought about all the kids out there who had big dreams but faced big obstacles. She thought about all the judges and teachers and people in power who needed to do better. She thought about how one 13-year-old girl with a voice and a plan had managed to shake an entire institution. And she smiled, because she knew this was just the beginning. Ruby's question to you: have you ever seen someone treated unfairly just because of how they looked? Have you ever felt like your talent or hard work didn't matter because of something you couldn't control? What did you do? What could you do? True talent, when it shines without permission, can change the world. Never let anyone dim your light. If Ruby's story inspired you, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been told they're not good enough. Someone who's facing unfair treatment. Someone who needs to know that one brave voice can start a revolution. And subscribe so you never miss stories about courage, justice, and the power of speaking truth. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you witnessed unfair treatment? Let's keep this conversation going. Remember, your voice matters and the world needs to hear it.